hopefully over the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'll go through my perception, and perhaps not just my perception, but the merchants and the spinnings around the world's perception of Indian cotton. I apologize if some of this has already been said during the discussions this morning, but anyhow, let's proceed as we go. So I put these two charts up here and the statements themselves. Indian cotton has been challenged over the last 4 to 5 years. If we start from the top, the average grade has certainly come down over the last 3 or 4 years. That's not just my perception, but that's the spinners' perception in most of the consuming markets. It's also very evident in the price relationship with other origins. I would say there's 2 or 3 main reasons. One is the trash, 2 is the moisture content, 3 is contamination. Of course, all of these issues are solvable, but we have to admit that it is on a steady decline over the last 3 or 4 years. So much so that contracts have to now be written with a moisture clause, trash guarantees. If you recall 12 months ago, or less so, we had Shanker 6 being offered and sold into different markets, probably a 300 to 400 point spread. That does nothing to the confidence of the spinners around the world. It's already been mentioned about contamination versus other origins. It's not comparable with other origins. So on the bottom right-hand side, we have the relative values, and my good friend Mowat brought these up today. If I was marketing cotton 4 or 5 years ago, Indian and West Africa would almost be a par. Now that spread is at least 4 to 5 cents. USA 31, 336, maybe it was 2 or 3 cents 4 or 5 years ago. It grows towards 6 or 7 cents today. Brazil, I don't think it has been as relevant as both West Africa and USA, but still that relative value has widened from 1 or 2 cents to 3 or 4 cents today. There are positive points for India, of course. It offers attraction to several markets, spot cotton, just-in-time cotton. It offers certain markets, particularly Bangladesh, organic cotton, organic driven by the retailers. It also offers certain markets, 31, 32 millimeters, that other origins struggle to offer. So what I'd like to do now is go through the 4 main destinations for Indian cotton. That's Bangladesh, Pakistan, Vietnam, and China. Each one we'll have a look how that market share has been over the last few years, and also perhaps discuss what's going on today in those particular 4 markets in relation to Indian cotton. So let's start with China. China will come to the market for Indian when it is relatively cheaper than other origins. I think what's very pertinent today and very recent over the last 3 or 4 weeks, and even so much over the last week or so, China's come to the market for Indian cotton, and probably for the first time in a while has paid a premium over that relative value. But why is that? Well, the fundamental reason is China's not buying USA cotton. The market's been selling to China somewhere between $600-700 on, when the market was 72-73 cents. We still have those inquiries today, more or less at that basis, maybe a little bit higher, which is unusual. But again, I emphasize that's because China can't buy USA cotton. So why is China buying that today? Well, it doesn't really need to by the S&D numbers. Has plenty of cotton itself. Certainly, probably enough to see it through to new crop. However, their domestic prices versus import prices of cotton is probably 10 to 15 cents different. So those with a quota, unlike the last couple of years, where they more or less hold on to it towards the latter end of the year, it seems some of the mills and traders have decided to participate early on. Again, because of that importing value being so much less than domestic cotton. I can't promise that will continue. We all discussed about the trade war. That could be settled at any moment, or it could be dragged on for another, who knows. But if it was settled pretty quickly and Chinese mills mentally prepared themselves to import USA cotton, it could halt the import of Indian cotton at the moment. Probably the most consistent market for India has been Bangladesh, a market that I visit 3 or 4 times a year for several years now. But again, we've seen there the favorability amongst Bangladesh spinners is geared towards other cottons other than India. Fortunately, because of the retailer demand, particularly for organic cotton, less so BCI, because BCI can be supplied from other origins, the Bangladesh mills step into the Indian market for Indian organic. That's a supporting point for India. For the sake of Indian cotton, I hope it continues, but there are challenges and question marks over that authenticity. Also, it offers Bangladesh on-time, just-in-time cotton, very vital for certainly the lower end of the mills in Bangladesh. You can get the cotton overland or by the sea route. 31, 32 mm is also made available to Bangladesh, and that takes precedence over other origins. But nevertheless, even with those 3 strong factors, Indians' market share in Bangladesh has declined. They themselves would complain, again, about the high moisture content, more trash, reliability, contracting parties. All of those issues that should be considered as an opportunity for the Indian ginners and the Indian shippers and ourselves to resolve. If we go on to Pakistan and Vietnam, Pakistan, I would say, is quite happy with Indian cotton. Pakistan, of course, is producing much lower counts than Bangladesh in general. So for Pakistan, it becomes a relatively price value. Less so a fixed price, but similar to what the Indian spinning mill will compare with the Indian cotton values, Pakistan does the same with its own domestic values when it starts to import cotton. The last 12 months, for sure, India sold less to Pakistan, but that's because of USA. That's because USA has had lots of discounted cotton this year. Pakistan has stepped into the market and bought cotton probably around the 75, 76 cents landed basis for 42, 51 inch and 3s, inch and 8 style cotton. So relative price value is very important to the Pakistanis. They remain a net importer, so they need cotton. If China was to come back to the market, then USA levels will probably increase, and therefore perhaps India has a competitive advantage, or then competes more strongly into Pakistan. I wouldn't say the door is shut on Pakistan for the rest of the season, but there's obviously political reasons also involved. But the Pakistanis have bought quite a bit of imports that in the main, certainly with the larger mills, should see them through to their own new crop in July or August. Vietnam. India's commanded a regular share of that market over the last few years. Again, it's a low-end market. Quite happy to spin it slightly lesser cotton. It's not challenged so much with contamination. But that said, it has to compete with USA. And right now, Indian cotton really does not, with the cheaper American and the large volume of American being made available. Of course, that can change if the high level of ice continues to rise and the fixed price of Indian cotton remains where it is today. So out of all those four markets, I think it's fair to say regarding Indian cotton, and I've spoken to several Indian shippers over the last 24 hours, really is China is the main driver at the moment. Even Bangladesh seems strangely subdued and quiet at this time of year, particularly for Indian cotton. So before I move, the next slide I wanted to discuss for 5 minutes was more around the Indian spinning mills and the importing of cotton into India and the values there. But is there any questions over relative values of Indian cotton, the quality of Indian cotton, and any of these particular four markets you'd like to ask? Okay. So Indian mills today, of course India is a net exporter, but it still needs, it's likely to import 2 million bales plus this particular season. It's a fair share of that, of course, is quality, particularly around contaminated free yarns, etc., etc. But as you can see over the last 10 years or so, each year on year, consumption and exports have exceeded production. And that's likely to be the case unless there's a rebound in production above 38 million bales. So my small message to the Indian mills, and I think they're already on it frankly, is to prepare themselves for other alternatives. They're fully aware of USA green cards. They then look at West African, but in the main they only seem to appear to look at Mali or Julius. They seem to be mentally challenged with the Mali Julius, and anything below it is likely to not be spinnable for them. Mali bales are marked with the quality, but approximately 13 to 15% is only marked Julius. There's probably 75 to 80% marketed and sold as Julius. That hasn't changed in the last 12 months, that hasn't changed in the last 5 years. It's up to the shipper to ensure that that cotton, regardless of markings, is up to the mark of what is probably a West African strict middling, and specifications speak for themselves, whether it's Micronair, staple or strength. So I would ask mills to think that. I would also ask mills not to dismiss other West African origins because they offer just as good equivalent to the Julius. It's true year on year, West African or particular origin within West Africa can be challenged. Last year, for example, there was issues in particular region within Burkina Faso that was hit with low micronaires. 3 or 4 years ago, it was low grades in Ivory Coast. This year, I'm a little bit cautious around Mali itself. Already we've had recent tenders for lower grades that we would only normally see at the end of the season, not halfway through the season. So that's my message to the Indian mills. Be prepared for other cottons. I could talk about Brazil, but I don't think that timely fits into the Indian requirements. Brazil comes available September through November, December, pretty much at the time of the Indian cotton harvesting and availability to the spinning mills. Whereas West African, USA is made more readily available probably through the February, July, August period, where there may be a gap for more imports into India. So that said, any questions? Sure.
This is not specifically to a point on the market, but I'm from Lubbock, Texas. Even there, the problem there is basically the plastic contamination.
Yeah.
Even, what's your sage advice on this contamination issue? It's an yellow plastic, so if you go to US and you trade there, the major concern is the yellow plastic, then Walmart plastic. This contamination is not coming under control. National Cotton Council did an educative program. They are trying their best. But what's the best way to handle contamination? I don't say Australian cotton is 100% top-notch. There also contamination is there. But how do you get to that level? Because world takes that as a benchmark in terms of contamination-free cotton, and we in US also try and we endeavor our best to reach that level. So what's